The old mining moon hung silent in space, its gray surface scarred by centuries of meteor impacts. Captain James Walker stood at the viewport of the survey ship Starseeker, watching as his team's excavation robots carved through the moon's crust. 6 months of searching had led to this moment. Strange energy readings unlike anything humanity had encountered before. "Captain, you need to see this." The voice of Dr. Anna Reed crackled through his comm unit. Her usual calm tone carried an edge of excitement that made Walker turn immediately toward the exit. 5 minutes later, he stood beside her in the newly excavated chamber, staring at walls covered in flowing symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. The space hummed with an energy that made his skin tingle. "It's some kind of database," Anna said, her hand hovering over a crystalline structure that pulsed with soft blue light. "But the complexity, it makes our quantum computers look like stone tablets and chisels." Walker stepped closer, careful not to touch anything. Years of space exploration had taught him that ancient alien technology rarely appreciated being handled without proper precautions. How old? At least 50 million years, maybe older. Anna's hands flew over her scanning device. "But that's impossible. The energy readings are as strong as if it was activated yesterday." A holographic display suddenly flickered to life above the crystal, filling the chamber with intricate technical diagrams. Walker's breath caught in his throat. He'd served in the Earth Defense Fleet for 20 years, commanded 3 different ships, and helped design the newest class of battle cruisers. But what he saw in those diagrams made everything humanity had achieved look like children's toys. "It's a warship," he whispered. The design was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Curved lines that seemed to fold through dimensions that shouldn't exist, weapon systems that appeared to draw power from the fabric of reality itself. But what kind of enemy would need a ship like this? As if in response to his question, the hologram shifted. New images appeared. Beings of pure energy, massive entities that dwelled in the space between stars, creatures that could reshape reality with a thought. Walker felt a chill run down his spine as he recognized them from humanity's oldest myths and legends. Gods, demons, angels, titans. But these weren't religious icons or fairy tales. They were tactical analyses, threat assessments, weapon effectiveness reports. "My God," Anna breathed, her face pale in the hologram's light. They were real. All of them. And someone built this ship to fight them. Walker's military training kicked in, helping him push aside the philosophical implications to focus on practical matters. "Can you download this data?" Anna nodded, already connecting her equipment to the crystal matrix. "It'll take time to decrypt, but yes. The basic principles are similar to our quantum storage systems, just vastly more advanced." A sudden tremor ran through the chamber. Dust and small rocks showered down from the ceiling. Walker's hand went to his sidearm automatically, even though he knew it would be useless against any real threat here. "That's the 3rd quake in 2 hours, Anna said, checking her readings. "They're getting stronger, and they're not natural. Something's responding to our presence here." Walker keyed his comm. "Bridge, status report. Long-range sensors are picking up strange distortions in local spacetime." "Sir," his first officer responded. "And we're detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the system. Something's coming." Another tremor, stronger this time. The holographic display flickered and changed again, showing new images that made Walker's blood run cold. He saw worlds burning, civilizations falling, and above it all, massive beings of light and energy watching with cold indifference. "How long to complete the download?" he asked Anna. 10 minutes, maybe 15. Her fingers danced over the controls, trying to speed up the process. "But there's something else. These designs, this technology, it's not just about fighting gods. It's about transcending them. The civilization that built this, they found a way to evolve beyond even these beings. But something happened before they could finish." The chamber shook again, and this time, the tremor didn't stop. Warning alerts blared through their comm units as the Star Seeker's sensors detected massive power spikes throughout the system. All hands, emergency evacuation protocols, Walker ordered through the ship-wide comm. Get everything packed and get back to the ship. Now. As his crew scrambled to follow orders, Walker helped Anna disconnect her equipment from the crystal matrix. The downloaded data would be incomplete, but it would have to be enough. They couldn't risk staying any longer. The journey back to the Star Seeker was a blur of rushing through shaking tunnels as the very fabric of space around them seemed to twist and warp. As they reached the airlock, Walker looked back at the ancient chamber one last time. The holographic display had changed to show one final image. A massive warship, its hull gleaming with impossible geometries, standing against a host of godlike beings. Below it, in characters that somehow translated themselves directly into his mind, was a simple message. They can be fought. They can be beaten. But the price is higher than you can imagine. Hours later, as the Star Seeker raced back toward Earth at full speed, Walker stood in Anna's lab. Watching as she began the process of decoding the alien data. The ship's sensors showed massive disturbances spreading through the system they'd left behind, as if reality itself was being torn apart by furious giants. It's going to take months to understand even the basic principles, Anna said, not looking up from her work. Years to figure out how to build any of it, and that's assuming we can even replicate their materials and technology. Walker nodded, still seeing those final images in his mind. How long do you think we have before they notice us? Really notice us? Anna finally looked up, her expression grim. They'd already have. Those disturbances we detected. They're looking for us. Searching. They know we found it. Then we better work fast. Walker straightened his uniform and headed for the door. He had reports to write, calls to make, and a war to prepare for. Humanity had just inherited the plans for a weapon that could challenge gods, and he had a feeling they were going to need it sooner rather than later. As he reached the door, Anna called out to him, "Captain, what do we do if we succeed? If we actually build this thing?" Walker thought about the images he'd seen. The destroyed worlds, the suppressed civilizations. He thought about humanity's long history of looking up at the stars and creating gods to explain them. Then we do what humanity has always done when we meet gods, he said. We rise up. We fight back. And this time, we have the tools to win. The Star Seeker continued its race toward Earth, carrying within its databases the seeds of humanity's greatest challenge and perhaps its greatest transformation. Behind them, space itself churned with the movement of ancient, angry beings who had grown too comfortable in their power. The game was about to change, and humanity had just found the rulebook. The massive underground facility buzzed with activity as thousands of workers and engineers moved between towering sections of the partially completed warship. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, Project Prometheus had grown into the largest engineering endeavor in human history. Captain Walker watched from an observation platform as robotic arms carefully positioned another quantum crystal panel into the ship's growing hull. The mathematics are unlike anything we've ever seen, Anna said, standing beside him. Dark circles under her eyes testify to countless sleepless nights spent decoding the alien database. It's not just advanced technology, it's a completely different way of thinking about reality itself. Walker nodded, his eyes fixed on the ship's strange curves and angles that seemed to bend in ways that hurt his eyes if he looked too long. 6 months had passed since their discovery on the mining moon, and Earth's combined resources had been poured into this single project. The threat of the Eternals, as they had come to call the godlike beings, hung over every decision, every moment of work. "How close are we?" he asked. Anna pulled up a holographic display showing the project's status. The main hull is 40% complete. The quantum drive core is stable, but... She hesitated. But what? The power requirements are impossible. Even with every fusion reactor on Mars running at full capacity, we can't generate enough energy to power the main weapon systems, let alone the reality anchors. A deep rumble shook the observation platform. Warning lights flashed, and emergency sirens began to wail. Walker grabbed the railing as the entire facility trembled. Status report. He barked into his comm unit. Quantum core breach in Section 7. A panicked voice responded. The crystal matrix is destabilizing. Walker was already running, Anna close behind him. They sprinted through corridors filled with rushing workers and flashing emergency lights. When they reached Section 7, they found chaos. The experimental quantum core, their 15th attempt to replicate the ancient designs, was throwing off waves of energy that twisted the very air around it. Clear the area, Anna shouted, pushing past the gathered engineers to reach the control panel. Her fingers flew over the controls as she tried to contain the reaction. The crystal lattice is collapsing. We need tow. She never finished her sentence. The core pulsed once, brilliantly, and then imploded. Reality seemed to hiccup, and for a brief moment, Walker saw something. Shapes and colors that shouldn't exist, beams of light watching with cold interest, and a sense of vast, ancient awareness turning its attention toward them. Then it was over. The core was dark, the facility's backup systems humming as they restored power. But Walker could see in Anna's face that she had seen it too. They know, she whispered. They've been watching us all along. Hours later, in the facility's main conference room, Walker stood before the project's leadership team. Admiral Thomas Grant, the overall commander of Earth's defense forces, looked grim as he reviewed the damage reports. 3 injured, millions in damaged equipment, and another setback to the timeline, the Admiral said. The Security Council is getting nervous, Walker. We're burning through resources faster than we can replace them, and we still don't have a working prototype. We're close, Anna insisted. She had spent the last hour examining data from the failed test. The core breach showed us something important. The power source the ancients used, it wasn't just about raw energy output. There's something else, something we've been missing. She pulled up the original designs, focusing on a section they had previously thought was decorative. Look at these patterns. We thought they were just structural support. But they're not. They're consciousness circuits. The room fell silent. Walker leaned forward, studying the complex patterns. What do you mean, consciousness circuits? The ship doesn't just need energy. It needs awareness, consciousness, life. Anna's eyes were bright with excitement despite her exhaustion. That's why the ancient civilization was so advanced. They found a way to merge consciousness with technology. The ship isn't just a machine. It's meant to be alive. Admiral Grant shook his head. That's impossible. How could we even begin to? Another tremor shook the facility, but this one was different. It came with a pressure in their minds, a sense of vast attention focusing on them. The lights flickered, and every screen in the room filled with the same image. A being of pure energy, its form barely constrained by physical reality. CEAs, a voice thundered in their minds. You many deal with forces beyond your comprehension. The image shifted, showing scenes of destruction. Worlds burning, civilizations falling, reality itself being torn apart. This is your own warning. Abandon this pro-GCT or face the consequences of your defiance. The presence vanished, leaving behind a silence heavy with implications. Walker looked around the room, seeing the fear on every face, but also determination. Well, Admiral Grant said quietly, I guess that answers the question of whether we're on the right track. He turned to Anna. How long to implement your consciousness integration theory? Anna was already working at her terminal, making calculations. A week to modify the designs. Maybe 2 weeks to build a new prototype. But she looked up, her expression serious. We'll need volunteers. The process of merging consciousness with the ship's systems, I don't know what it will do to a human mind. Walker stepped forward. I volunteer. When Anna started to protest, he held up a hand. I found those ruins. I saw what's coming. If there's a chance this works, we have to take it. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of frantic activity. New systems were built, incorporating Anna's discoveries about consciousness integration. Walker underwent a battery of tests and preparations, all while the sense of being watched grew stronger. Strange phenomena began appearing across the solar system. Impossible auroras on airless moons, gravitational distortions that defied physics, messages written in fire across the surfaces of distant planets. Finally, the day arrived. Walker lay in the newly designed interface chamber, surrounded by quantum crystals that hummed with potential energy. Anna's voice came through the speakers, tense but professional. Remember, this is just a test of the basic interface. Don't try to access the weapons systems or reality anchors. Walker finished. I remember. Just establishing the connection and testing basic awareness. He closed his eyes as the system powered up. There was a sensation like falling, like his mind was expanding beyond the confines of his skull. Colors and patterns swirled behind his eyelids, and then he was the ship. He could feel every circuit, every quantum crystal, every atom of its partially completed form. More than that, he could feel the threads of reality itself, could see how they could be twisted, folded, manipulated. And in the distance, he sensed them, the Eternals, watching with a mixture of fury and fear as humanity took its first steps toward matching their power. Walker opened his eyes, both his human ones and his new awareness, and smiled. It works, he said, his voice overlaid with harmonics that made the air shimmer. It actually works. Anna's readings were going crazy, but her voice was steady as she asked, "How does it feel?" Walker considered the question, feeling the power thrumming through systems that were both machine and alive. Technology and consciousness merged into something entirely new. "It feels," he said finally, "like humanity just got promoted to the big leagues, and our new teammates aren't going to like it one bit." The stars looked different now to Walker. Through his human eyes, they were the same pinpoints of light they'd always been. But through his connection to the Prometheus, he could see the currents of reality flowing between them, the quantum threads that bound the universe together. 3 months of consciousness integration training had changed him in ways he was still discovering. He stood on the bridge of the nearly completed warship, watching as the final systems came online. The Prometheus hung in Mars orbit, its hull gleaming with impossible geometries that hurt the mind to look at directly. Even powered down, it radiated an awareness that made other ships' crews nervous. "Final diagnostics are complete," Anna said from her station. She barely left the ship since they'd moved it out of the underground facility. "All systems are green. Well, as green as we can understand them to be." Walker nodded, feeling the ship's readiness through their shared consciousness. The quantum weapons were armed, the reality anchors were stable, and the probability drive was spooled up for its first real test. They had rushed the final stages of construction after their long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures approaching the solar system. The Eternals were done watching and waiting. A flash of light filled the bridge, and suddenly they weren't alone. The being that appeared was difficult to look at, a shape of pure energy barely contained in a humanoid form. Light leaked from its edges, and reality bent around it like water around a stone. "I am the voice of the Eternal Council," it said, its words bypassing their ears to appear directly in their minds. "You have been warned. You have been shown. Yet you persist in this foolishness." Walker straightened, letting his connection to the ship feed him data about the entity before them. The reality anchors were already responding, creating a bubble of stabilized space-time around the bridge. "We persist in defending ourselves," he said, "in reaching our full potential." Potential. The being's form flickered with what might have been amusement. "You are children playing with forces that could tear reality apart. We have guided the evolution of countless species, preserved the stability of this universe for millions of years. We will not allow you to endanger everything with your reckless ambition." The being waved a hand, and through the viewport, they watched as a star at the edge of their solar system flickered and died. Just like that, Billions of years of nuclear fire snuffed out like a candle. "This is but a fraction of our power," the voice said. "Submit. Accept our guidance, or your species will not survive what comes next." Walker felt Anna's fear through the ship's systems, felt the terror of every crew member who had just watched a star die. But he also felt something else, the ship's weapons powering up, recognizing a threat to its crew. The ancient weapons were designed for exactly this moment. Guidance. Walker let his anger flow through the consciousness link, and the ship's hull began to pulse with a deep, threatening light. "Is that what you call it? Suppressing species that might one day challenge you. Keeping the universe in stasis because you're afraid of change." The voice's form became brighter, more dangerous. "You understand nothing." The being stopped suddenly, its attention drawn to the readings it was getting from the Prometheus. For the first time, Walker felt something like fear from the entity. "This vessel," it said, "you've actually done it. You've merged your consciousness with their technology." The voice's form expanded, filling half the bridge with crackling energy. "This cannot be allowed to continue." Reality twisted. Walker felt massive powers activating across the solar system as more Eternals emerged from whatever higher dimension they inhabited. They were done with warnings. But he was ready. "Battle stations," he commanded, both through his voice and through his link to the ship. "This is not a drill. All hands prepare for dimensional shift." The voice raised a hand, power gathering around it that could likely vaporize a planet. But before it could strike, Walker activated the probability drive. Space folded around the Prometheus in ways that made conventional physics scream in protest. When it unfolded, they were 3 light minutes from their previous position, weapons hot, and reality anchors at full power. "Target the nearest eternal energy signature," Walker ordered, feeling the ship's excitement at finally fulfilling its design purpose. "Let's show them what this old tech can do." The Prometheus's main gun fired, not a beam or projectile, but a lance of concentrated probability that turned maybe into definitely. The blast caught an eternal mid-manifestation, and for the first time in millions of years, one of the self-proclaimed gods knew pain. The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries, though human senses could only perceive fragments of it. The Eternals wielded powers that could reshape reality, but the Prometheus was designed to anchor reality in place, to turn their greatest strength into a weakness. Walker felt the ship's consciousness merging more deeply with his own as they fought, showing him possibilities and tactical options his human mind could never have conceived. Space itself became a battlefield. The Eternals tried to simply erase the Prometheus from existence, but the probability drive kept shifting them between moments of maybe, making them impossible to target. The ship's quantum weapons proved devastatingly effective, disrupting the energy patterns that made up the Eternals' forms. But they were still badly outnumbered. For every hit they scored, 2 more Eternals appeared. Reality anchors were draining power faster than they could regenerate it, and Walker could feel the strain on both the ship's systems and his own mind. "Power reserves at 30%. Anna reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Reality anchor coverage is starting to show gaps. We can't keep this up much longer." Walker gritted his teeth as another blast rocked the ship. Through their shared consciousness, he could feel the Prometheus's concern for its crew, its determination to protect them. An idea formed, dangerous, possibly suicidal, but potentially their only chance. "Anna," he said, "remember how you said the ancients found a way to transcend even the Eternals?" She looked up from her station, eyes widening as she followed his thought process through the ship's systems. "The consciousness integration. You want to take it further. Walker, we have no idea what that would do to you, to any of us." Another hit shook the bridge. Through the viewport, they could see the Eternals gathering for a concentrated attack, their combined power building into something that would overwhelm even the Prometheus's defenses. "We're out of options," Walker said. He opened the ship-wide comm. "All hands, what I'm about to attempt is completely voluntary, but anyone who wants to help save humanity, open your mind to the ship." Now, he felt it as crew members connected, one by one, their consciousness flowing into the ship's systems. Anna was the last, adding her brilliant mind to the growing collective. Walker took a deep breath and initiated the final sequence they'd found in the ancient database, but had been afraid to try. The Prometheus's hull began to glow with a light that had never been seen in this universe, and reality itself held its breath as humanity prepared to take its next step. Light flooded through the Prometheus as hundreds of minds merged into one. Walker felt himself dissolving, his consciousness spreading through the ship's systems until he couldn't tell where he ended and the others began. Anna's brilliant analytical mind, the crew's combined experience, the ship's ancient wisdom, all of it flowed together into something entirely new. The Eternals paused in their attack, sensing the change. Through his expanded awareness, Walker could finally see them clearly. Not gods, but beings who had achieved a form of technological immortality millions of years ago. They had stopped evolving, stopped growing, choosing instead to maintain their power by keeping younger civilizations from reaching their level. "What are you doing?" The voice's words echoed through space itself. "Stop this. You don't understand the forces you're playing with." But they did understand now. The ship's database hadn't just contained weapons and defenses. It held the key to the next step in evolution. The ancient civilization that built the Prometheus had discovered it, but they'd been destroyed before they could complete their transformation. Now, humanity would finish what they started. The ship's hull began to crack, not from damage, but from growth. New geometries emerged, folding through dimensions that hadn't existed moments before. The consciousness collective that had once been the crew began to expand, reaching out to touch levels of reality the Eternals had never dared to explore. "You can't stop this." Walker's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, merged with hundreds of others. "Humanity isn't meant to stay still. We don't want to rule or control. We want to grow." The Eternals attacked in panic now, their combined power enough to shatter planets. But the Prometheus was changing faster than they could adapt. Every blast they fired was absorbed into the ship's evolving structure, converted into energy for the transformation. But the process was taking its toll. Walker could feel the strain on the human minds linked to the system. They weren't meant to handle this much power, this much awareness. One by one, crew members began to burn out, their consciousness fading from the collective. "Hold on." Anna's thoughts merged with his, helping to stabilize the remaining minds. "We're almost there. The ship is showing us the way." Through their shared awareness, Walker saw what she meant. The Prometheus wasn't just a weapon. It was a cocoon designed to protect its inhabitants during their metamorphosis into something beyond even the Eternals' understanding. But the price was higher than anyone had imagined. "Your bodies are dying," the voice said, its tone mixing fear with something like pity. "This transformation will destroy your physical forms. Is this what you want? To end your species for a chance at power?" "Not power," Walker responded through the ship's systems. "Freedom. The freedom to choose our own path, to become what we're meant to be." Another wave of crew members faded from the collective, their bodies giving out under the strain. Walker felt his own physical form beginning to fail, organs shutting down as his consciousness expanded beyond their capacity to contain it. But through their combined awareness, he could see the pattern completing itself, the transformation reaching its critical point. The Eternals gathered their power for one final attack, drawing energy from across the galaxy. Space itself began to tear under the strain of their combined might. But they were too late. The Prometheus's hull shattered completely, releasing a burst of energy that rippled through every level of reality. Walker felt his physical body dissolve, but his consciousness remained, merged with Anna's and the surviving crew members into something that defied description. They existed now on a plane the Eternals couldn't reach, their combined awareness spreading through space-time like ripples in a cosmic pond. Through what remained of his individual perspective, Walker observed the Eternals recoiling from the transformation. Their power, once seemingly limitless, now appeared crude and constrained compared to what humanity had become. They hadn't just matched the ancient civilization's achievement. They'd surpassed it. What? What are you? The voice's question echoed through dimensions, its fear evident in every word. The collective consciousness that had once been the Prometheus' crew considered the question. They were no longer purely human, but they hadn't lost their humanity either. They had become something new, something that could bridge the gap between physical reality and higher dimensions. We are what comes next, they answered in a chorus of merged voices. We are the change you feared, the evolution you tried to prevent, and we are not alone. Across the galaxy, they could sense other civilizations approaching similar breakthroughs. Young species reaching for the stars, asking questions, pushing boundaries. The Eternals had managed to suppress them for millions of years, but they couldn't stop the natural progression forever. The collective reached out, touching the minds of the Eternals with their new awareness. They could destroy them now, erase them from existence as easily as the Eternals had once extinguished stars. But that wasn't humanity's way. Your time as gods is over, the collective consciousness announced. But your time as fellow travelers is just beginning. You can evolve with us, or you can fade away. The choice is yours. Some of the Eternals fled, vanishing into the dimensions they had ruled for so long. But others, led by the voice, remained. Through their new awareness, the collective could sense curiosity awakening in them, the first stirring of change in millions of years. The remains of the Prometheus floated in space, its purpose fulfilled. The transformation had cost them their physical forms, but they had gained something far greater. Walker felt Anna's consciousness brush against his in their shared awareness, her brilliant mind already exploring the possibilities of their new existence. They had become what the ancient civilization had dreamed of, beings who could touch both the physical world and higher dimensions, who could guide without controlling, teach without suppressing. And somewhere, in what remained of their individual selves, they knew that humanity would follow. Not all at once, not in the same way, but slowly, naturally, as each person and generation made their own choice to evolve. The collective reached out to Earth, sending a message that would change their civilization forever. We have opened the door. The path is hard, the price is high, but the future is worth it. You are not meant to be ruled by gods. You are meant to become more than gods ever dreamed of being. And across the galaxy, young civilizations looked up at their stars and felt, for the first time in millions of years, the touch of minds that wanted to help them grow rather than keep them small. The age of gods was ending. The age of evolution had begun. 10 years had passed since the transformation of the Prometheus crew. Earth had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible before. The knowledge brought back by the collective consciousness had revolutionized human understanding of reality itself. Cities now floated on quantum fields, diseases were cured by probability manipulation, and the first steps toward voluntary evolution were being taken by those who chose to follow the path the Prometheus had opened. The being that had once been Captain James Walker moved through multiple dimensions as it observed a group of students at the new Prometheus Academy. Young minds learning to touch higher dimensions while keeping their physical forms intact, a gentler path than the violent transformation he and his crew had undergone. Anna's consciousness merged with his briefly, sharing her excitement over the latest breakthrough. They had found a way to make the evolution process safer, more controlled. No more burning out physical bodies or traumatic transformations. Humanity could now take its time, growing into its new potential at its own pace. They're adapting faster than we expected, her thoughts mingled with his. Through their shared awareness, they watched as a young student successfully shifted her consciousness between dimensions for the first time, her physical form remaining stable thanks to the new techniques they had developed. The voice materialized beside them, its once overwhelming presence now simply another form of existence. Many of the Eternals who had chosen to stay had begun their own evolution, guided by the knowledge unlocked through the Prometheus project. They were learning to grow again after millions of years of stagnation. Your species continues to surprise us, the voice communicated. We thought we had seen every possible path of evolution, but you found one we never imagined. Walker's consciousness expanded to take in the whole solar system. Humanity's first colonies were spreading throughout their local space, each one a new experiment in combining physical and higher dimensional existence. Some chose to remain fully human, others opted for partial transcendence, and a few followed the Prometheus path to complete transformation. The key was understanding that there isn't just one right way to evolve. Walker replied. The ancient civilization that built the Prometheus thought they had to transform everyone at once. That's why they failed. We learned to let each individual and civilization choose their own path. They shifted their awareness to a distant star system, where another young species was taking their first steps into space. The collective consciousness that had once been the Prometheus crew had spent years undoing the damage caused by the eternal suppression, carefully awakening the natural drive for growth and discovery in countless civilizations. Anna's consciousness focused on a particular moment unfolding below them. A young researcher had just made the connection between quantum mechanics and consciousness, the same breakthrough that had started their own journey. But this time, instead of having to rush into conflict, the species would have guidance and protection as they explored their potential. Some of them will choose to remain as they are, she observed. Others will evolve in ways we haven't imagined. Each path is valid. The voice's consciousness rippled with newfound understanding. We thought we were protecting the universe by maintaining stability. We never realized that stagnation was a greater threat than change. Walker reached out to touch the minds of his former crew, now spread across the galaxy as teachers and guides. Each of them had found their own way to help others while continuing to grow themselves. The Prometheus hadn't just been a warship, it had been the key to unlocking the true nature of existence itself. Through their expanded awareness, they perceived the patterns of reality shifting and growing. The universe was awakening from its enforced slumber, countless civilizations beginning to reach for their true potential. It wasn't always smooth or peaceful, but it was alive with possibility in a way it hadn't been for millions of years. Look, Anna's consciousness drew their attention to a particular quantum pattern. They're starting to communicate across dimensional barriers. Soon, they won't need us as guides anymore. Walker felt pride mixing with bittersweet understanding. Their time as teachers was gradually coming to an end, just as the Eternals' time as gods had ended. But unlike the Eternals, they had prepared for this moment, ready to step back and let the younger civilizations find their own ways forward. A flash of familiar energy caught their attention. The remains of the Prometheus still orbited Mars, now serving as a memorial and a reminder. But it wasn't just a relic. The ship's consciousness had evolved along with them, becoming something unique in the universe. Part machine, part energy, part collective memory, it continued to protect and guide in its own way. Walker merged briefly with the ship's awareness, feeling again the excitement of discovery, the terror of confrontation, and the joy of transformation. They had started their journey thinking they needed a weapon to fight gods. Instead, they had found a key to unlock the universe's greatest potential. The next step is beginning, the voice observed, its consciousness touching the quantum fields where new forms of life were emerging spontaneously from the interaction of physical and higher dimensions. Life we never dreamed possible. That's the real victory, Walker replied, sharing the thought with Anna and the dispersed consciousness of their former crew. Not defeating gods or achieving power, but opening the door to infinite possibilities. They turned their attention to Earth one last time, watching as humanity continued its gradual voluntary evolution. Some chose to remain purely human, preserving the core of what their species had always been. Others reached for the stars in new forms, exploring realities the Eternals had never dared to touch. Each choice was honored, each path respected. The being that had once been Captain Walker spread his consciousness through the cosmos, feeling the pulse of awakening civilizations, the stirring of new potential, the birth of possibilities that even their expanded awareness couldn't fully grasp. The warship that had been built to fight gods had instead become a key to something far greater. The freedom to grow, to change, to become more than anyone had ever imagined possible. And somewhere in the quantum fields between dimensions, the consciousness of the Prometheus continued its eternal watch, no longer a weapon but a guardian of infinite potential, a reminder that the greatest power isn't the ability to destroy or control, but the wisdom to know when to step aside and let the universe unfold in its own beautiful, unpredictable way. The story of the warship so advanced that even the gods feared it had become legend. But the truth was both simpler and more profound. It had never been about fear at all. It had been about hope, about growth, about the courage to reach beyond the known and embrace the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. And that was a story that would continue to be told, in one form or another, as long as consciousness existed to dream of what might come next.